The atmosphere at Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport tonight felt nothing like a routine arrival for a tennis player. Long before Alexandra Eala even appeared, crowds had already filled the area around Terminal 2, creating an energy that could be felt throughout the airport. Cheers echoed across the taxi stands, while the roar of thousands of fans shook the terminal windows. It felt less like the arrival of a young athlete and more like the welcome reserved for a world champion or an international superstar. But this wasn't a football team or a famous music group arriving in Paris. This was Alexandra Eala, the pride of the Philippines, and the reception she received left France completely stunned. French reporters, airport staff, and travelers watched in disbelief as massive crowds of Filipino supporters flooded the terminal waving blue, red, and yellow flags high above their heads. Tennis players usually arrive quietly, surrounded only by coaches and a few fans. Tonight shattered that image entirely. Filipino communities from across France, along with supporters traveling from neighboring European countries, came together to welcome Alex Eala in a way rarely seen in professional tennis. The chants grew louder every minute. Coordinated cheers echoed through the halls, while drums transformed the airport into something closer to a championship stadium than a transportation hub. For many witnessing the scene, it became clear that Alex Eala is no longer simply a rising tennis star. She has become a cultural phenomenon and a source of pride for Filipinos around the world. The French public, known for their passion for tennis but usually calm reactions, appeared overwhelmed by the scale of the celebration. Journalists covering the event admitted they had never seen an airport reception like this for a tennis player. The emotion, the passion, and the sheer number of supporters created a moment that turned an ordinary night in Paris into a historic spectacle centered entirely around Alexandra Eala. It was a powerful collision of sports, culture, and national pride, one that left French media struggling to describe what they had witnessed. Across television broadcasts, social media, and sports headlines, the same question kept appearing. Who is this young woman capable of attracting tens of thousands of passionate supporters before even stepping onto the clay courts of Paris? Many in France were amazed by the global reaction surrounding Alexandra Eala. They began asking how the Philippines produced a tennis star who carries the hopes of an entire nation with such confidence, composure, and maturity at such a young age. And perhaps the biggest question of all is what this means for the tournament itself. Because the Alex Eala phenomenon is no longer just a regional story quietly growing in Southeast Asia, it is rapidly becoming a worldwide movement that the entire tennis world can no longer ignore. Alex Eala has officially arrived in Europe with unstoppable momentum. The moment she stepped through those airport doors and was welcomed by a thunderous roar from thousands of Filipino supporters, the atmosphere surrounding the tournament changed instantly. Suddenly, this was no longer just another tennis event focused on rankings, trophies, and match results. It became something far greater, a global movement powered by pride, identity, and the unwavering support of Filipinos determined to turn every court into home ground for their champion. Alex Eala's journey now feels bigger than sports itself. She is a young woman who conquered the junior stage and is now preparing to challenge the professional world under the attention of millions. And standing behind her is one of the most passionate fan bases tennis has ever witnessed. That is why Paris is buzzing tonight. That is why the French sporting world seems genuinely stunned by what is unfolding. Because to truly understand the impact of this arrival, you have to look beyond the airport crowds and viral videos. You have to understand the deeper story behind it all, the rise of a global icon and the cultural wave that has now crashed directly into the heart of European tennis. To understand why this moment has exploded across France, you first need to understand the evolution of Alexandra Eala herself. Professional tennis has long been viewed as a traditional and highly disciplined sport, built on quiet professionalism and controlled emotion. Then came Alex Eala, a fearless left-handed talent from Quezon City, who has spent years proving she was never meant to stay confined within the traditional boundaries of tennis culture. Her rise did not begin this week in Paris. It began years ago at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Manacor, where she developed a style built on relentless pressure, mental toughness, and fearless aggression. Every stage of her journey prepared her for moments exactly like this. So when she arrived in France, Filipino fans did not see her as just another player entering a tournament draw. They saw her as the symbol of a rising Philippines, a nation increasingly making its presence felt on the global stage of international sports. What shocked the French media most was not only the size of the crowd, but their inability to fully understand the emotional force of the Filipino spirit and the power of the global Filipino community. In France, tennis culture is often associated with elegance, restraint, and respectful applause. But for Filipinos, sports carry something much deeper, a powerful emotional connection tied to pride, sacrifice, resilience, and unity. So when thousands of Filipinos declared they were ready to support Alex Eala in Paris, they were not speaking casually. They were organizing a massive emotional movement. Groups coordinated travel plans from the suburbs of Paris, while supporters from Marseille, Lyon, Nice, and even neighboring European countries spent days organizing online before her arrival. By the time Alex Eala landed in France, the stage had already been set for one of the most unforgettable welcomes European tennis had seen in years. Social media became the driving force behind this extraordinary wave of support. What the French public witnessed was the kind of passion usually associated with Europe's biggest football clubs on Champions League nights. Seeing that same intensity directed toward a young Filipino tennis player completely shattered the traditional image of tennis culture in France. And nowhere was that shock more visible than at the airport itself, which quickly became the center of this growing phenomenon. According to airport staff, security measures had to be upgraded multiple times in the hours leading up to Alexandra Eala's arrival. The reason was simple: the scale of Filipino support had been massively underestimated. French authorities reportedly expected only a few hundred fans waiting at the terminal. Instead, they were met with enormous crowds so energetic and emotional that many observers compared the atmosphere to a national celebration or even a presidential arrival. At that point, calling it a rock star welcome no longer sounded exaggerated. The moment Alex Eala stepped into public view, camera flashes lit up the terminal non-stop, creating a scene that looked more like a celebrity red carpet than an airport corridor. Among the crowd were elderly supporters who had traveled for hours by train just to wave Philippine flags and hold handmade signs reading, "Laban Alex." There were children sitting on their parents' shoulders, staring at her with the kind of admiration usually reserved for superheroes. In tennis, this level of emotional devotion is incredibly rare. Most players spend decades winning Grand Slam titles before earning this kind of global support. But Alex Eala has inspired it through something even more powerful, becoming the living symbol of an entire nation's hopes, dreams, and pride. The impact of this phenomenon is already sending shockwaves throughout the French tennis world. Tournament organizers are now facing a situation unlike anything they expected. How do you manage crowds that behave like a massive home audience for a player competing thousands of miles away from her homeland? Roland Garros and other French tournaments are familiar with passionate fans, but what is arriving alongside Alex Eala feels completely different. Filipino supporters do not simply applaud after points. They sing together, chant loudly, wave flags non-stop, and create an emotional wall of support around their player. For opponents, that atmosphere could become deeply intimidating. Imagine being a French player competing on home soil, only to realize the stadium feels overwhelmingly in favor of Alex Eala because tens of thousands of Filipinos have transformed the venue into a sea of energy, emotion, and noise. French journalists have even started describing it as a peaceful invasion of joy, and the phrase perfectly captures the surreal atmosphere now unfolding across Paris. But beyond the emotion and spectacle, there is another reason this arrival has created such excitement. Alexandra Eala is not just a beloved public figure, she is also a serious competitive threat. Years of training at the Rafa Nadal Academy helped shape her into a player with tactical intelligence far beyond her age. Her left-handed serve forces opponents into uncomfortable positions, opening the court with sharp angles before she attacks with relentless baseline consistency. She combines patience, aggression, and composure in a way that makes her especially dangerous on clay courts, and many analysts now believe she is capable of producing major upsets against some of the biggest names in tennis. What is truly shocking the French tennis world is the growing realization that Alexandra Eala is not arriving in France as an underdog tourist. She is arriving as a legitimate threat on clay. France has always taken enormous pride in its deep connection to clay court tennis, a surface considered almost sacred within European tennis culture, and now, standing in the middle of that historic tradition, is a young woman from the tropics who looks completely comfortable dominating on the red clay. Standing behind her is a massive wave of passionate Filipino supporters ready to fight for every point alongside her. The trending phrase, 50,000 Pinoys ready, is no longer just an online slogan. It has become a real and visible movement spreading throughout Paris and beyond.